the Melbourne Cup, but the world's greatest race. And we're going to take you through Melbourne Cup history with Flemington's Walk of Fame. It begins in 1861 with Archer, who won the first 2 cups, and we'll take you through the champions of this race: Carbine, Far Lap, Rising Fast, Kiwi, and what about the likes of Ethereal and Efficient? Let's go. 1883, and Martini Henry became the first New Zealand-bred winner of the Melbourne Cup. He won his first start. That was in the Victorian Derby. 3 days later, he backed up and won the Melbourne Cup at just his second start. Let's move you ahead to 1890, and perhaps arguably the greatest of them all, Carbine. He was a star 2-year-old in New Zealand. He ended up coming to Australia, where he won the Melbourne Cup in a field of 39 runners carrying 66 kilograms. Carbine etched his name into Melbourne Cup history. We get to 1930, and perhaps the best ever, certainly one of the most celebrated, the New Zealand-bred champion Far Lap. He won the 1930 Cup only 3 days after Tommy Woodcock put himself between criminal thugs, gunmen, and saved the horses. He won that in a drama-filled running of the 1930 Cup. We move forward to 1938, and a great story. This one of the tales of triumph, with catalogue winning for Granny McDonald. She was a New Zealand trainer who was denied her name in Melbourne Cup history because women weren't allowed to have a licence. Her husband, Alan, was credited as being the Melbourne Cup winning trainer. 1954, one of New Zealand's great success stories, Rising Fast. He completed the Caulfield Cup, Cox Plate, Melbourne Cup treble. No horse had ever done that before, and he narrowly missed out the following year too. 1960, the Centennial Melbourne Cup, won by High Jinks for Trevor Knowles. 62, the Hamilton Stayer, Even Stevens winning. 1964, Polo Prince for Ron Taylor in the saddle. And of course then we begin the Bart Cummings era. He came and plundered the New Zealand sales to get the horses like Lightfingers in 65, the Great Galilee in 66, and Red Handed in 1967. 1970, Baghdad Note did it for Otago, and we move you forward to one of the most memorable ones. 1976, Van der Hum, the wettest Melbourne Cup on record, and he swam in the hands of Bob Skelton. I remember Roy Robinson, who trained the horse, telling me later on, many years later, about the story. The party began in Matangi with the Robinson family. They went down to the bottle store, and the clerk said to them, "You've got enough booze here as though you've just won the Melbourne Cup." And of course they had to say, "We did." And perhaps one of the most famous wins of them all, 1983 with Kiwi, Snowy Lupton, and Jimmy Cassidy. He was last. He couldn't win that Melbourne Cup, but of course he'd won a Wellington Cup, and he was one of the finest stayers New Zealand ever produced, farm trained out of Waverley. We get to my era, 1988, Empire Rose, the big mare for the Bodle family. Even back in 1987, beside it, Stewie Hale bred Kensai. Empire Rose was what really got me started. Of course, Laurie Laxon and Tony Allen. Terrific for Shane Dye. Letzalopa began her career in New Zealand. Sub-Zero beating Viandacross. Some of the great wins. Dorremus in 1995. Jim Gibbs started that horse's career. Might and Power, the pride of Windsor Park stud. Jezebel for Brian Jenkins, cornellaring the race with Champagne. You've got Rogan Josh there. Brew for Mike Moroney, giving him his win with Kira McAvoy from the outside gate, one of New Zealand's most famous. And of course, who can forget Ethereal for Sir Peter Vella, Philip Vella, and of course Sheila Laxon. Ethereal stood on her phone, broke her phone only a couple of days earlier. What a win that was. Since then, it's been fairly lean pickings for the New Zealanders. Who can forget though Makybe Diva's great treble ending in 2005, but we can claim this one, 2007, Efficient. He produced that horse to win. Since then we do move down. We saw Shocking retired to Rich Hill Stud as a stallion, and then of course Rich Hill Stud kept their own piece of Melbourne Cup history with Prince of Penzance in 2015, and of course we claim 2021, Very Elegant, who began her career in New Zealand, and of course it was a Kiwi combination of Chris Waller and James McDonald, making one of the most emotive Melbourne Cup wins. That's the Melbourne Cup, a little bit of a walk down memory lane, the great history of the great race, and of course there will be more great memories made who will add their name to the Melbourne Cup history books on Tuesday.